All right, it is my pleasure to introduce Robert Horsley for this morning's second keynote, Your Identity in a New World. Robert is Chief Operating and Product Officer at Fragmented Workrite. Robert is a visionary leader whose decade-long career has centered on transforming mature business models and driving innovation within the legal and workforce mobility sectors. In his role at Fragmented Workrite, he oversees state-of-the-art compliance solutions for U.S. employment, verification, positioning organizations to be proactive, compliant, and future-ready in an evolving landscape. With that, please welcome Robert Horsley.
Wow, that doesn't sound all that interesting at all. You know, when Hari called me and said, you know, we'd love to have you share some thoughts and what you're thinking about. You've been doing this a long time. I said, Hari, are you calling me old? By the way, you said you had gray hair? No. He said, no, you've been doing this a long time and you seem to stay ahead of the curve. You seem to stay at looking what's next. So yeah, share with us what you're thinking about and what you're doing and focused on. I said, okay, I can do that. Before I do that, Los Angeles, come on. The weather today is unbelievable. I grew up here in the mean streets of West LA, Westwood. So it's really fun to be back. I do love all the aspects of Silicon Valley and all that brings now in my life, but I'm a little uncomfortable with this institution. I might have a strong allegiance to one that's further downtown, right? We'll compare the football records at any time. But anyway, I love being here. I really do appreciate this institution, this opportunity to chat with you all. And today, to chat with you all a little bit about identity. Believe it or not, that's what I'm thinking about when I'm not thinking about how the world's completely in chaos with immigration. But we're going to put that aside for a few minutes. So, identity. It used to be simple. It was about a name, a handshake, and about a reputation that they always told us would follow with us. But today, identity is really, really fragmented. It's personal, it's digital, it's professional, and increasingly, it's artificial. So the question is no longer just, who are you, but who are you online? Who are you in the workplace? On paper, and increasingly in the eyes of a machine. Now, a lot of you would say, that's just theoretical. But you know, it's something I've started to live through as a father, as a business leader, and now as someone that's founded a software company that's built at the intersection of trust and technology. That's what gets me up in the morning now. So let me zoom back a little bit. How did I get here? I talked to you about kind of my allegiance from a school perspective, but when I was there, I really didn't like technology. I thought it was something somebody else could do. Didn't really love math, which is why I went into accounting. But as I moved on into kind of consulting and corporate finance, I started helping companies do buyouts and help turn around companies. And I quickly realized that technology was the fastest way to solve problems, to close gaps, and to bring scale. Scale, my favorite word, scale. Anthony knows that. My favorite word is scale. I think it's what makes things really, really work. And in doing so, I made myself some notes here, just in case I get lost, because I'm a little ADD. That should be no surprise to a lot of people. But so we're talking about technology and how fast it can go, and in the light, and there's now a threat with it. But when I started seeing technology and some of the problems it could solve and how fast it would go, I've got this theory called gravity. Not my theory, but I'm quick to embrace gravity. In my mind, where digitization is going now and where technology is going very fast. And there's a lot of positive aspects to it, and we've all embraced those pretty quickly. I woke up this morning to a digital alarm. I ordered dinner after being late last night with a digital app. My daughter Venmo requested me from university for money. I found out later that she had donuts at 2 in the morning through a digital app. There are all kinds of ways that I'm going to watch the USC football game tomorrow digitally when I'm going to the Eagles concert tomorrow night in Las Vegas. How about that? I hear this fear is pretty fun, yeah? Okay, highly endorsed digitally. But back to the theme, technology is now, in large part, has got the threat associated with it too, right? So all these great things, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. The 1 step back in my mind is the threat that it can not be real. We've seen technology lift companies and democratize access and connect people across. The guy that's helping me with the words down here is completely crazed because I'm completely off script. So apologies for that. I'll try to get back to where I'm supposed to be. We've seen companies grow fast because of technology and digitization, right? It's democratized access, which I think is phenomenal. And it's helped connect people across continents. It's how I started to live my life as I was traveling a lot. But those same tools are now deceiving us. Have any of you heard of the Scarlett Johansson story when somebody replicated her likeness and started promoting goods without her permission? That's a big deal, right? How about the Tom Cruise deepfakes? If you saw the first initial picture, it was from Mission Impossible, where it's one of my favorite deepfake, which was from 20 years ago during the Mission. You guys have ever seen Mission Impossible? You remember when he pulled off his mask, and he had the little voice thing, and he was impersonating people and getting them to do all kinds of awful things? Deep fakes. I think the funniest thing is then somebody built a deep Tom Cruise fake and impersonated him all over the internet. Great example. More in our world, though, right? What about the finance worker in Hong Kong who wired $25 million based on the guidance from his CFO, who he was on a Zoom call with? Turns out he was the only real person on that Zoom call. He was faked into sending that $25 million. That happened to my CEO, not $25 million, thankfully, but he responded to something where somebody responded to kind of a fake email. So this is becoming more and more. I think the world that we're living in is much more easily, so the other side of the sword, if you will, of digitization is it's much easier to fake things out. It's much easier to copy and to steal and the like. So again, the positivity, I raised 3 boys a little bit on my own at the beginning but at the same time growing a fairly global, or helping grow a fairly global organization. So I was always on a plane somewhere. So I used digital tools to help me stay connected with them. I was one of the early adopter for all those type of things. They were great for me. I didn't want to miss anything, so I was trying to always stay in touch. I had a daughter some years later who's the one that's requesting money all the time now, the only one that's not or is still on the payroll. But I started to really realize this thesis of integration. I was trying to balance my life, and it really wasn't possible. It really came down to, hey, it's all about work-life integration. And my wife gives an example of actually something I do well, apparently, and that is integrating my life into theirs. She has this example called a carousel. Have any of you ever been, even in a little child's playground, a little carousel you jump onto? She likens my life to that I integrate wherever I'm coming from and going to, I jump back on the carousel. and I meet them where they are at. And as opposed to saying, hey, I'm home, let's start over, whatever's important to me, let's go. No, I jump on the carousel, integrating. And I think that's given me great perspective as a business leader as well, is that everything in our world needs to integrate. You need to integrate into workflows. And that has given me a great place to kind of start from when we started to create what we did. And that, as I started thinking about it then, from an identity perspective, okay, what if identity starts to fail? As a father, I think about this all the time, right? If the person that's calling me for money again, or that is in trouble, or whatever, there's always an ask. How many people here have kids? How many of you ever gotten the first time when they come up to you, they're saying, what do they want? So it's like pause for 3 seconds and you'll get the ask. But what if it's really not them? From a business standpoint, what about when somebody new joins the team? Are they really good at what they say they were good at? Are they really who they say they are? What if, so it's almost in a business situation, right? It's almost for every hire you make, for every approval, for every transaction, it depends on identity being real. I've given you some examples where it's failed. I mean, there are lots of them. I'm starting to hear where people are interviewing for jobs and is really not the person at the interview that is trying to get the job. We've got plenty of examples where people from bad actor countries are bringing their people into the country on the long play, and you actually have spies inside your company. So all this is really important because when trust is lost in this world, you're really sitting on a shifting sands, which makes everything very, very difficult. So my journey that got me here was long before deepfakes. In the immigration space, or it's really not in the immigration space, but adjacent, everybody that gets hired in the United States has to fill out a form. And it's called the I-9 form, ever since 1987. Has anybody ever filled one of these out? You probably won't remember it because it's not life-changing. But the problem was that it's a simple little form, but nobody ever took it seriously. And they were always a mess. And companies would get fined or debarred from using the immigration. All these horrible things that could happen if you didn't do this right, if the government was paying attention. But they discounted it. It was commoditized. The person, the first one in the totem, first one in the hiring line would be charged with this, and they didn't want to do that. So I developed a technology that was kind of like, I used Al Gore's internet, so that dates it a little bit, but we developed a technology that would really let them get these forms done much more easily, build a program that they can manage the program. They felt much more comfortable with it at the end of the day. But it was really all about identity and work authorization, which left me in a really good place when things start to get hectic and identity becomes a bigger deal. So we've been able to now focus not just on, it's a great climate to be in if you're doing what we're doing, because the government is enforcing all their rules, right? They're not just letting them kind of happen. All these little, I call them, there's a lurking liability that's out there for most companies that have all these processes that you're taking for granted. They all have liability associated with them. This particular one I like to call nuclear, because it's simple, but if you don't get it right, you're going to get fined. You're going to get fined a lot of money, and you're going to be in the papers because it's such a political topic. So there's a lot of attention on this. And not just on getting the form right, but the government is very focused on making sure people do things right. But on top of that, there's this, are you really who you say you are issue. Now, I think in order to make that right, what I started thinking about is you can't just have another siloed product out there. You can't just, okay, now go get your I-9s done right. And by the way, you need to do this in the UK now, in Australia, and just about everywhere. But you can't just force people to go do something that should take 5 minutes and go pop over here and go do that. But it goes back to that integration theme, right? We need to meet people where they're at in the onboarding process, whether that's when they're first starting to interview, and are you really who you say you are, or when you're starting the onboarding process and the like. So that all started to come together. And that's where WorkRight was kind of really born, is how do we help companies identify the fact of who they're hiring and are they doing all the right things, right? So do you have answers to these questions? These questions became particularly more important to companies as the lack of authenticity became easier. Do you really know who you're talking to when you're interviewing them, right? Are you who you say you are? Have you done those things? Because it's easy to kind of fake. Where are you getting that source of truth? Will you be able to do the things I'm hiring you for? Again, you know, you've got a picture of yourself rowing and you're getting into school as a rower just because you were able to fake that out? That's a USC negative. Can you work for us? That's the traditional I-9 right to work things around the world. So we built it all around that. But these other questions, are those documents valid? There are ways now for us to check those documents and authenticate them, right? So shouldn't that be built into the process? Can you work on this contract? More and more companies are not allowed to have certain people working on certain contracts. And that's being enforced. Are you keeping track of that? If the government showed up tomorrow, could you tell them that you've got that well handled? Can they work on this technology? There are lots of, you know, you've read in the papers that there's a lot of restrictions on who can work on AI technology and who can't. Are you keeping track of that? So in our ecosystem, we're trying to answer all these questions in an integrated form, in an integrated ecosystem. And kind of the timing's been really right for us. But that's because we built it in an open framework, we built it with an open mindset, and we weren't there just trying to fill out a form. We were out there really trying to answer questions that needed to be answered in a much more simplistic way. So that's great. We're helping people be more compliant. I call it reg tech. But now that you know more things, and did you know most of this information was self-reported until just recently? Where are you from? What can you do? Where do you want to go? That it sat in databases, and now, you know, some of the biggest companies in the world are turning around and saying, none of this information is right. It's all self-reported. So with all these tools now, with the tools that we put together, and others have too, you should have much more confidence in that information. You really know who you're talking to. You really know where they can go. You really know what they can do and what they can't do. So you should be able to use that from a talent and enablement perspective as well. So not only are you doing the things you have to do, but now you've collected information about what they can do. And you can start matching people and solving problems in a much, much, much more rapid pace. I think that's the exciting part of what are you doing to try to not only solve problems, but now come up with solutions that touch other parts of the business. I call it the Trojan horse, right? You're gathering all this information because you have to, but now what are you doing with that information to deploy and solve other issues that are out there? So in order to get this, because people are people and they only want to do what they want to do and they will question everything, and I think that's probably not a bad thing anymore, is we've started to participate in a bigger ecosystem. So if we are in the business of making sure that you have the right to work and you are who you say you are, and in our immigration practice that you actually did go to that school and that you were born when you were born and all those different informations, and we can make that more authentic, well, why don't we put that in a wallet that nobody charges anybody for, but now lets you store it? I mean, how many of you have a wallet either on your Google phone or your Apple phone? Any of you? Do you guys use it? I don't even carry a wallet anymore. It's so bad. Unless I'm traveling, right? Then they want my driver's license for some reason. But that will change as well. So what we're apt to do in saying, hey, we're going to solve this business imperative. We're going to be ready when the government comes calling to make sure that we're playing by all the rules, which there are rules for good reasons, right? We're going to ask people to give us a lot of information, but now we're going to put it in a place where they can reuse it. right? So when they go to get a bank loan, they've got, how many times have you been asked to go get it? I refinanced my house not too long ago. The information I had to go find was a nightmare. But now, what if it's just in my wallet? Here's who I am. Here's all the different pieces. And again, it's not just about your work life, right? But it's about your entire life. So if we can put together an ecosystem where you can use that wallet effectively, to me, that's what success looks like. So what am I working on? Figuring out a way to get my hair darker. Figuring out a way to stay in touch with my kids in their new life, off my payroll. And in a way to really come up with solutions and to embrace technology, embrace digitization, and embrace, the fact that people are always going to try to game it. We have to be one step ahead of that. So, Hari, I hope that helped. I hope that gives some things for people to think about, and I appreciate your time today. Love to talk to anybody afterwards.